One phone call to the Pentagon was all it took to unravel their careers and remind the world that injustice has nowhere to hide. It had started out as an ordinary drive through one of those sleepy patches of Louisiana places most people only remembered because they had to stop for gas or stretch their legs. Major General Alexis Monroe had driven this route more times than she could count. She was used to moving through rural America unnoticed, unbothered, unseen. That was often the goal. There were no security convoys, no flashing government plates, just her, a modest rental car, a deadline, and classified instructions waiting at Barksdale Air Force Base. The mission was urgent, but not yet dangerous. Or so she thought. Somewhere between Lake Charles and Shreveport, as she passed the skeletal remains of a once busy cotton mill, Alexis noticed her secure Pentagon-issued phone dropping bars. She needed to make a call immediately. It couldn't wait. Not for 5 minutes. Not for an hour. She spotted an old, half-forgotten gas station up ahead, Jensen's Fuel and Food, its sign barely clinging to its rusted pole. The pavement of the lot was cracked and sun-bleached, the paint of the pump lines barely visible. Alexis pulled in and parked toward the side of the building, far enough from the entrance to get privacy, but close enough to not seem suspicious. A few locals were chatting outside, leaning against dusty pickups, swatting at mosquitoes. They paid her no mind, at least not yet. She stepped out of the car, holding her secure phone to the sky in search of signal. General Monroe, verifying identity. Initiating briefing, she said, her voice calm and precise. The reply from the Pentagon came instantly: updates on sensitive troop movements and satellite repositioning. Intel transfers coded in language only the highest ranks would understand. Alexis remained alert, eyes scanning the lot with the discipline bred into her since West Point, but her attention stayed on the voice in her ear. For now, what she didn't know was that inside the grimy gas station storefront, behind the weather-stained counter, a woman named Sandra Dale was watching her. Sandra, in her mid-50s with a hard face and lips pressed so tight they nearly disappeared, saw only what she expected to see: a black woman standing by a car, phone pressed to her ear, not dressed for business, not from around here. Trouble, in Sandra's mind, always looked a certain way, and Alexis looked exactly like it. Sandra didn't ask questions. She didn't step outside to greet or offer help. Instead, she reached for the dusty beige landline and called the Mosswood Police Department. "Got someone acting strange out at Jensen's," she murmured. Might be high. Talking to herself. Suspicious. That was all it took. She hung up before any follow-up questions were asked. Across town, Officers Bradley Ross and Tanner Holcomb were finishing their second cup of diner coffee when the radio crackled to life. Most days in Mosswood passed with the tempo of molasses. These two officers didn't mind a bit of action, especially if it gave them an excuse to assert a little power. They pulled their sunglasses on, tossed their half-eaten pastries in the trash, and peeled out of the lot like they were heading into a standoff. Back at the gas station, Alexis had no idea trouble was speeding her way. Her conversation with the Pentagon had turned even more critical. She relayed acknowledgments, memorized new coordinates, confirmed time-sensitive drops. But even as her focus stayed sharp, her training prickled the back of her neck. Something was wrong. Flashing red and blue lights lit up the windows of the gas station. Gravel scattered as the police cruiser skidded into the lot. Alexis paused her conversation, lowering the phone but not disconnecting. Officers Ross and Holcomb stepped out of the car before it had even fully stopped. Both men walked like they were hunting. Ross had that thick, square build and buzz-cut posture that screamed control. Holcomb was wiry and twitchy, with a permanent smirk he wore like a weapon. Alexis placed her phone carefully on the hood of the car and raised her hands, palms open. Her heart was steady. Her posture was deliberate. "Good afternoon, officers," she said evenly. "Can I help you with something?" "License and registration," Ross barked. She nodded slowly. "Of course. My ID is in my wallet. I'm on active duty. Major General Alexis Monroe. I'm on official assignment." She moved with controlled slowness, retrieving her wallet and pulling out both her military credentials and her federal travel orders. She handed them over. Holcomb barely glanced at the documents before sneering. "A general? Here? You expect us to believe this crap?" Ross held the ID like it was forged. "Nice try," he said, tossing it onto the hood like trash. Alexis blinked in disbelief. That's a federal ID. Please contact your superior. Shut up, Holcomb snapped. You think you can play games out here? Not today. A small crowd began to form, people coming out of the gas station, pulling out phones, whispering. Some were curious, some amused. None intervened. Alexis kept her voice firm but respectful. I'm requesting that you verify my identity with Barksdale Air Force Base. This is a serious mistake. But Ross had already unhooked the cuffs. Turn around. She didn't move. You're detaining a federal officer without cause. This is unlawful. Ross grinned. You're gonna do what? Call your boss from jail. Holcomb grabbed her arm with unnecessary force. Alexis didn't resist, but her jaw clenched as the cuffs locked around her wrists. The cold metal bit into her skin. Her secure phone, still connected to the Pentagon, slid off the hood and crashed onto the pavement, voice still faintly audible. You've made a mistake, she said again, more to the universe now than to them. Ross shoved her against the side of the car, and the crowd gasped. Inside the Pentagon, the line went from static to chaos. Lieutenant Commander Ethan Wexler, monitoring signals from a secure command room in Washington, saw General Monroe's line go red. Then dead. He tried to re-establish contact. General Monroe, this is Command Ops. Do you copy? Nothing. Colonel Megan Prentice stepped in beside him. Trace her signal. Within seconds, her location pinged. Jensen's Fuel and Food, Mosswood, Louisiana. That's not on her route, Prentice muttered. She picked up the red phone, direct line to Barksdale. Send a convoy, she ordered. Now. Back at the station, Alexis was sitting on the concrete curb, hands cuffed behind her. Holcomb stood over her like a prison guard. Who are you really working for? You have my orders, she replied coldly. You're gonna regret lying to us, Ross added. That's when the radio on Holcomb's belt chirped. Unit 3, be advised. Subject ID confirms active federal status. Do not detain. Repeat, do not detain. Orders from Department of Defense. Release subject immediately. Both men froze. What the hell? Ross whispered. They fumbled for the keys, unlocking the cuffs like boys who knew the principal was coming. Alexis stood up slowly, flexing her wrists, and looked them both in the eye. You will regret this, she said with quiet certainty. Seconds later, a line of black SUVs tore into the lot. No sirens, no nonsense. The convoy from Barksdale moved with military precision. Doors opened in perfect sync, and a team of armed officers surrounded Alexis in protective formation. Lieutenant Colonel Trevor Raines approached first. General Monroe, are you injured? No, she said. But they are. He turned to Ross and Holcomb. You are ordered to stand down. Any further interference will be met with federal charges. Ross tried to stammer an excuse. Holcomb muttered something about suspicion. You saw a black woman and made assumptions, Raines replied sharply. That will haunt you. The crowd had gone silent. Alexis was escorted into the lead SUV. As the convoy pulled away, she looked out the tinted window. Sandra was watching from the door, her phone in hand, face pale. In the SUV, Alexis didn't speak. Raines gave updates. The Pentagon had launched an internal investigation. DOJ had been alerted. Media requests were flooding in. Alexis stared straight ahead, unmoved. It's not just about me, she said finally. It's about every person who's been doubted for how they look instead of who they are. By morning, the video of her arrest had gone viral. No yelling, no resistance. Just a black woman stating, calmly, that she was a general and being cuffed anyway. It sparked outrage across the nation. News anchors replayed the footage. Civil rights leaders condemned the officers. Veterans groups demanded accountability. The governor called it a disgrace. In Mosswood, Police Chief Eldon Franks looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. At a hastily arranged press conference, he muttered something about miscommunication and training errors. A young black reporter called him out. Is racism part of your department's training? He had no answer. Ross and Holcomb were suspended, their prior complaints finally made public. Alexis didn't need revenge. She needed truth. And it was pouring out faster than anyone could stop it. At Barksdale, Alexis prepared for one final movie press conference. Not for publicity, for clarity. She stood in full dress uniform beneath the noon sun, cameras clicking. My name is General Alexis Monroe, she began. I have served this country for nearly 3 decades. Yesterday, in Mosswood, none of that mattered. She paused. I was not seen for my rank, my record, or my purpose. I was seen only through the lens of prejudice. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She stood in dignified silence between truths the world had too long ignored. I speak not for myself, but for every person who's ever been mistaken for less than they are. She stepped back. No dramatic exits. No applause begged for. But the sound came anyway. Loud. Raw. Earned. She walked away, unshaken. Because one thing was clear. They might have tried to erase her presence, but now, the whole world knew her name. And they would not forget.